Psychedelic compounds in some form or another have played key roles in most cultures throughout history. Um, some cultures that have used psychedelics include Native Americans, ancient Sumerians, Aztecs, Egyptians, even Christianity, which is the most widely followed religion in the world today. Um, I want to explore how psychedelics can actually have a very profound and helpful influence on the world and on individuals. So keep an open mind and try not to judge until you have completed the video. Now, the Native Americans, they had peyote, which they used in their rituals and ceremonies. They would get blasted on peyote and dance around the fire, and they had other rituals for it as well. And what the peyote would allow them to do is communicate with ancestors, spirit guides, as well as spirits. Um, the Egyptians, they had the blue lotus or the blue water lily, and that contained a form of MDMA, and you can see this depicted in many hieroglyphs, and it usually coincides with people who are partying and having a good time.
When looking back on the history of Christianity, you do find that at its roots does lie mushroom cults. The Amanita muscaria, which is a red and white psychedelic mushroom, psilocybin, it can be found in many depictions of Jesus and even Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, and white mushroom represented the tree of knowledge.
One of the Gnostics, and the Gnostics were very early Christians, one of their beliefs was that God, or Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah, whatever you want to call it, whatever they called it, was not a god. It was a entity that sought to trick mankind into believing in him so that he can increase his power. And Jesus said himself, this is not God. We are the gods and goddesses. It is inside of us. Now, I propose that the snake in the Adam and Eve story was trying to liberate Adam and Eve from their shackles, while the entity that is known as God didn't want them to have knowledge. He wanted them to blindly follow and never question.
Now, I want to talk about a couple of specific psychedelic compounds. First, I want to talk about ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a tea that is primarily brewed in the Amazon in Brazil. When consumed, it will take you on a 6-hour journey. There are staggering amounts of people who have been addicted to harmful drugs, such as opium, and taking ayahuasca had completely cured the addiction, both mentally and physically. And there's also a great deal of people who use ayahuasca also report contact with a blue lady, and they call her Mother Ayahuasca. Another common theme seemed to be snakes, and like in most religions, the snake is considered a teacher. You'll also see things like therianthropes, which are animals or half animal and half human creatures. They are also common. There are even reports of typical UFO abduction scenarios, specifically interacting with the alien greys. And not only that, but there are so many people that say that ayahuasca has completely changed their lives, changed them for the better. There they changed the way it changed the way they viewed life, and it changed the way that they treated others. The brew is often created with the use of the chacruna vine, which is rich in dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is a very powerful psychedelic substance. And they also mix it with a plant that contains an MAO inhibitor. And the use of the plant that contains the MAO inhibitor is important because DMT is not really active, as our bodies have enzymes to break it down before it can take effect. And the MAO inhibitor allows DMT to become orally active. Now, smoking DMT is an entirely different animal. It resembles more the ingestions of mushrooms. It will break down all boundaries of reality and slingshot you into a completely alien dimension. And smoking DMT, unlike ayahuasca, the effects will only last 10-15 minutes, but some people, they report to have been there for days, weeks, years.
Now, DMT is the most powerful psychedelic that is known to man. It's produced in larger. It's produced by your own brain, and it's believed to be produced by the pineal gland, which has long been associated with your third eye. And DMT is produced in larger amounts during heavy REM sleep. Well, when you dream at night, you are literally having a psychedelic trip. The DMT is responsible for your dreams. And it's also produced in massive amounts when your body believes that it's going to die, which would explain why people who have died and been revived, having reported to have peered into the other side or talked to a family member or hovered over their own body, and things like that. When Dr. Rick Strassman got approval to conduct the first experiments on DMT in 30, 40 years plus maybe, the volunteers, a lot of them reported to have seen intricate clockwork or turning gears, which some people now describe as seeing the gears of the universe. There are also reports of coming into contact with strange entities, and there are even reports of similar to ayahuasca, blue entities or blue females. And therianthropes are also common and typical alien abduction scenarios.
You will find alien depictions of alien greys in many cave paintings, carvings, and hieroglyphs all around the world. You will also find therianthropes, strange depictions of what seems to be flying saucers as well. Now, how do completely unrelated cultures have very similar depictions and very similar myths and beliefs? Something inspired these myths and inspired these cultures to draw these beings, and they never had contact with one another. These cultures never intermingled or mixed. So again, it's very strange.
Could there be a connection? Could these cultures have communicated with the same entities through the use of their psychedelic rituals? I believe in extraterrestrial life in the universe. I think the universe is teeming with life. I think it's foolish to believe that we are the center of the universe. We need to get out of that mindset right now. And I believe what is happening when a person reports a UFO abduction scenario, at least a legitimate one, is that's the DMT allowing you to communicate with entities that live parallel to our realm. They're there all the time, but you cannot always see them. And even when mass amounts of people see the same thing, it's possible that they have passed through a natural energy wave that has caused their brains to spontaneously create a larger DMT output, which is why they're viewing these flying saucers. They're viewing these things that you wouldn't normally be able to view. Now, if you look at alien abduction reports, most people will report to have been in their bed, either lying there, and then they see animals, even therianthropes, outside of their window. Owls and deer are very common, or they're woken up and they're being taken, or even just communicating with an alien in their dreams. Now remember, the DMT is responsible for your dreams. Even, is it possible that that is what an typical alien, as we would think of them, are? Interdimensional beings that are there but we can't see them all the time? Now, everybody knows that the government is corrupt. Anyone that believes that they have your best interest at heart really needs to wake up. I used to believe the same thing until I woke up and started thinking for myself and started to realize, hey, things are not how they seem. America is supposed to be a free nation, but we are not allowed to explore our own minds. Graham Hancock actually said it best. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, we already have laws to protect us from bad behavior. If someone goes into a store, they pick up a coffee maker, they try to walk out with it, all of a sudden a cop stops them. The end result is the same, whether you're high on marijuana or completely sober. You get punished, you get fined, you get sent to jail. It doesn't matter if you're on marijuana or alcohol or not. The end result is the same. If a person is using a substance and is not harming anyone, is being responsible with it, is capable of functioning with it, then they should be allowed to do so. They should not be persecuted. Now, on the other hand, if someone is abusing these substances and doing harm to others, they definitely do need to be punished. I want everyone to understand that just as there are positive entities out there, there are also negative ones. If you go into it with a dark mind, you are sure to manifest dark things. If you decide to do psilocybin mushrooms on your bed in your room and you have posters of Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees on your wall, say you have some skull statues sitting on your dresser, you are sure to steer yourself into a dark journey. But let's say you are in nature. Let's say you're on a camping trip with your friends in the woods, and you all sit down, and before consuming, you set an intention, something you want to gain from the experience. You almost surely will have a positive and profound psychedelic journey. And now, psychedelics should not be used for recreational purposes. We have other things for that, such as marijuana, which can be a mild psychedelic in itself when eaten. It's more psychoactive. Now, let's go back to the Gnostics' belief on God real quick. They said that God wasn't God. He was a demigod that sought to reap the power from mankind in order to increase his own. And this is the same entity that wanted to keep Adam and Eve under his thumb until the snake came to liberate them. That sounds very much like a dark entity. Another example is Montezuma, who was an Aztec emperor. He was in contact with a dark entity whose name translates into our language as hummingbird. And this entity was constantly giving Montezuma bad advice. And Montezuma followed this entity He wholeheartedly believed in this entity, and as a result, mass amounts of people were ritually sacrificed. They were laid on an altar and had their hearts removed while they were still beating, and they would use a dull knife to cut out these people's hearts. So that is an example of contact with a dark entity. You must be cautious. If you wish to have a psychedelic experience, um, then make sure someone is with you that has experience, especially if you don't. Make sure you have the right set and setting in order to steer you towards a positive journey.